So, what is a market? Well, that depends on the context in which you're using the word. So, let me ask it another way. What market are you in? It's one of the most informative questions you can ask because it reveals a lot about attitudes and approaches to marketing. I worked with a large car dealership group a while ago when I was living in the US. They had several locations selling new and used cars, and each showroom had posters all over the wall saying things like, "We're driven by our customers," or "We measure our success by our customers' satisfaction," and other similar sentiments. And when I asked several senior members of staff the question, "What market are you in?" the overwhelming response can be summed up as selling cars, which was interesting. They had posters everywhere declaring they were customer driven, but their underlying core belief was that they were in the business of selling cars. And this is not an uncommon problem, but it is inconsistent with being a great marketing business. So how should you answer the question, what market are you in? Well, in 1960, Theodore Levitt, a Harvard Business School professor, wrote a well-known and widely referenced article titled Marketing Myopia. In it, he argued that companies are too focused on the needs of their business and concentrate too much of their effort on making and selling products and spend too little time thinking about what customers actually want or need. And therefore, he concluded, they should switch from a production and sales mindset to a customer-oriented one, specifically by asking themselves the question, what market are we really in? It really is a pivotal question. So let's take a look at some of the common definitions of market that we need to avoid. At its most simple, it might mean the location where trade and exchange takes place, like Billingsgate Fish Market in London or the New York Stock Exchange. But this clearly isn't the definition that we are looking for. Now, another definition is the economist's version, where a market is an abstract concept that matches supply and demand for any commodity or broad class of goods and predominantly helps to explain price. Think of the oil market or the housing market. When demand is higher than supply, prices rise, and when supply is higher than demand, they fall, which is closer to what some business people think of as a market, but it's too broad for practical use. If you find yourself answering the "what market are we in" question with the healthcare market or the aviation market or the energy market, then you are guilty of thinking more like an economist than a marketer. Now, a more common definition that business people often use is to define the market in terms of products. The credit card market, the smartphone market, the athletic shoe market, and so on. This definition might be useful in some circumstances, but it doesn't help us become good marketers. If you define a market in terms of product, you are by definition product focused and not customer focused. And you also run the risk of being too broad in your definition, say sporting equipment, and you end up with an unmanageable scope and too many diverse needs. Too narrow, say elite running shoes, and you create blind spots and missed opportunities. Now, sometimes market is used as a verb, as in, how are we going to market our new product? Which usually means, how are we going to sell it or promote it? Which leads to the most common misunderstanding that market and marketing refer to the act of advertising or the process of lead generation and demand stimulation, essentially pushing products, which is the situation in the car dealership I mentioned at the beginning. Now, these four common definitions can be summarized as place, price, product, and promotion, which are all elements of marketing and may sound familiar as the famous 4 Ps of marketing or the marketing mix, which, in my opinion, is an idea that is about as useful as an inflatable dartboard. A 4 Ps mindset will ultimately drive you down a product-oriented dead end. The 4 Ps is one of those zombie marketing concepts that just won't die. It owes its continuing existence to the power of alliteration and its familiarity, rather than its practical usefulness. And it should be evicted from modern marketing theory. And while we're in the mood for a little evicting, it should take the SWOT analysis with it. But again, that is just my opinion. Okay, so let's get back on track. We've now looked at what a market isn't, or at least what it isn't given the context of the question, what market are you in? So let's look at what it is. The definition of a market in our context must include reference to the customer and their desired outcomes. Here's an example of what I mean. This was the business structure of Procter & Gamble a few years ago. It's changed since then, but it will still serve our purpose. Their business was structured with 6 divisions: beauty, grooming, healthcare, and so on. Under each division, they had sectors. Let's take healthcare as an example. One of the sectors they operate in was dental care. And below this are their billion-dollar brands, one of which is Oral-B, the toothpaste and toothbrush brand. Now, as suggested earlier, P&G could define themselves as being in the global consumer goods market, or the healthcare market, or the dental care market, or the toothpaste market, but none of these would help them to be good marketers, which obviously Procter & Gamble are, because none of those definitions refers to the customer or desired outcomes. A way to think of this is using decreasing tangential circles representing subsets. At the highest level, P&G is in the consumer goods business, a subset of which is the healthcare division, and a subset of the healthcare division is the dental care sector. Notice the absence of the word market at this point. Now, the next subset isn't on the typical org chart, the customer. In this example, I'm going to describe the customer broadly as parents of young children, and as a subset of that customer group, I will identify a desired outcome they're looking for. In this case, let's say dental hygiene for their children. And as a subset of that outcome, I might show a product that delivers on that outcome. For example, Oral-B Stages toothpaste. And this is how you define a market: customer, desired outcome, and possibly product. Although I usually recommend that you simply stick with customer and outcome to keep the focus on the customer. So the answer to the question, what market are you in, should always be answered with we provide X with Y, or we deliver Y to X, whichever you prefer. We provide parents of young families with dental hygiene for children, or we deliver dental hygiene for children to parents of young families. It will give you a customer outcomes mindset. Who are you talking to? What outcomes are they looking for? Or what outcomes would they value? Remember, this is a simplified example to make a point. Outcomes get a lot more complex, as we will see. Now, you'll notice that by defining a market this way, it means that you are probably involved in multiple markets, each with different customers and desired outcomes, with many customers looking for more than one desired outcome, and often having primary and secondary outcomes, which is great because that's exactly how exceptional marketing businesses organize themselves. Now, you may not have the resource or the opportunity or the capability to organize your marketing department along these lines, but you can and should organize your thinking along these lines, because thinking differently doesn't cost you anything. Now we have said that we answer the question, what market are you in, by reference to customers and desired outcomes. We provide X with Y. We have created 2 further questions. How do we define customers, and how do we define outcomes? And these are both pretty big topics, but let's take a brief look now. Let's take customer first. Many businesses have multiple types of customers involved in a single transaction. As an example, I worked for a business that designed and manufactured anatomical endoprosthesis for surgical joint replacement, and one of their products was an artificial hip joint. The consumer of this product is the patient. They get the main benefit from its use: increased mobility, reduced pain, and improved quality of life. Yet the product might be paid for by an insurance company or a government national health provider based on a purchase order provided by the hospital buying team, responding to a specific request from the orthopedic surgeon, following advice and opinion she received from her professional colleagues and peer group, and all of this following an initial discussion with the patient. So who is the customer in this scenario? Now, this is a separate principle called customer mapping that we will get to in a future video, but the general rule is start with the end user as a default and only deviate from this if you have specific reason to, and you often will have specific reason to do just that. Great marketing businesses find themselves creating different value offers and messages to different types of customers for the same single transaction, and that's a good thing. So what about outcomes? For now, just be aware that desired outcomes are not always defined by the customer. They don't always know what they want. In the Marketing Myopia article I mentioned earlier, Levitt acknowledged as much by describing customers as unpredictable, varied, fickle, stupid, short-sighted, stubborn, and generally bothersome, which was pretty harsh. But the truth is, customers don't always know what they want. They don't know what is possible until we show them. Marketing is about understanding what is possible and to create outcomes that we think customers will be willing and able to pay for, even if they have no idea what future outcomes may be conceivable. Now, my video on outcomes has a detailed discussion around this, but for now, remember the principle: customer outcomes are not always customer defined. Okay, so let's summarize the main point of this video. Define your markets by customers and desired outcomes. You provide X with Y. It's a simple and powerful way to focus on what's really important. And by asking your colleagues, and especially your bosses, what market are we in, you will get a great insight into how your organization really thinks about marketing. So hit subscribe or follow below to get future videos, or get in touch if you have any specific questions.